What's up, y'all? Welcome to Tabletop Bros. Today we're going to be doing the final assembly on some Adeptus Custodes Vertus Praetors, including a shield captain conversion. But as we sort of put everything together and finish it up, I thought we would talk just a little bit about sub-assemblies. So there's a strong argument on the internet as to whether or not people should use sub-assemblies, and the truth is, you should do whatever works best for you. I personally like to use sub-assemblies, but keep it to a minimum. There's a lot of benefits that you gain by doing sub-assemblies. There's also a lot of drawbacks as well. Some of the benefits are, in particular, if you're using an airbrush, you don't have to worry about overspray. It also allows you to get down into some of the details that you might not otherwise be able to reach conveniently. And some of the drawbacks are that you have to go back through and do touch-ups on the areas that you cut off the sprue. And if you don't plan it out well, you can create more work for yourself than is necessary. So for me, I have a pretty good idea as to what I like to do and how I like to do it. And a lot of that comes from experience, learning from previous errors, or things that have worked really well in the past. So in this case, I've actually left all the riders off of the Jetbikes. The bases themselves and then also the lance arms are magnetized, so we don't have to worry about that. I left the heads off and put them on what I like to refer to as a head sprue, and you'll see also the little ponytails are on there as well. And then there's some small pieces also, like their shoulder pads and their daggers, stuff like that. The missiles and the bolters. And again, most of the reason I leave those off is just because it's substantially easier to actually paint the details on them and then add them on later. You also have to pay attention to when you're attaching these pieces, what kind of super glue is going to be left behind, and make sure that's not going to cause too much issues or require too much touch-ups afterwards. Like for instance, the cape, I do most of that with the airbrush, so it's nice to be able to leave that off. And then the majority of the areas where it mounts are going to be covered up by the shoulder pads. And then the shoulder pads specifically, I like to leave those on the little pieces of sprue because when I go to paint them, they tend to fly all over the place. They're a pain to hold on to. And you have to worry about if you're going to touch wet paint, etc. So it's nice to be able to leave them on these little bits of sprue. And I cut away the majority of the actual sprue that holds them on prior to painting. So at the end, I just have to do a couple little touch-ups on some small areas. Now it's important still to go through and like clean off the little bits of sprue that are left behind. And then again, just touch up any of those areas that are going to be visible. It's also nice as well for certain bits to be able to scrape away the paint and then attach just straight plastic to itself. So here we're just kind of going through now. We have the riders attached to the actual bikes now. We're just putting a little extra glue in the joints and everything, attaching on the shoulder pads. For me, this is some of the most fun of the entire project because you work on them for days or sometimes weeks at a time. Get all the little details looking cool, and then the final assembly really just lets the project take shape. It's also a sort of like ASMR, visual stimulus, just getting to see all the little bits go together. So now I'm clipping off what I refer to as a head sprue. I essentially put the ponytails on one half, and then I'm just cleaning off the actual like paint where they were mounted to the bases, the leftover super glue, etc. And then I'll go through for the actual heads themselves and do the same thing. And the main reason I use the head sprues is because it allows me to get up close to the details, the eyes, all that cool stuff. I don't have to worry about my paintbrush banging into the sides of their little like protective kind of like neck regions in particular on these models. But in general, I typically tend to do all of my heads this way, wherever possible. And all it is just a leftover piece of sprue, and it has the little flat areas that come up off of it. So I just use those as like a little plinth to mount each of my pieces to. And then once I'm done painting them, take them apart and then put the sub-assemblies back together. I do make sure to scrape away the excess paint for the mounting areas. Now I'm not using plastic glue, but if you did, that would be required. I'm using super glue, but I found in general that what happens if you don't scrape away the little bit of paint and then you just attach those pieces on, the actual paint itself will become brittle and kind of like chip away, and then you just end up having to re-glue it. It's usually not a huge deal, but if you avoid having these little bits of paint left behind, you can avoid the pieces kind of breaking off and then having to re-glue them. So once we get the ponytails attached to the heads and then we put the heads on the actual bodies, our bikes are pretty much complete. And I have to say that they came out really well. Now we have the magnetized bases, those are custom made. And then we have the magnetized lances as well. And the main reason I do that is for like transport and playability. Being able to like reposition the lances if they're in the way for like the actual game terms is nice. Also being able to like remove the bikes from the bases or the lances from the bikes stops them from breaking when you're transporting them, etc. So once everything is fully assembled, not only do I glue everything and wait for the glue to dry, but I like to come back through and put some wash over top of it as well. The actual washes tend to like seep down into the cracks and everything, and they give it like an extra layer of seal. And believe it or not, they actually make the joints themselves substantially stronger. So I would always recommend doing this. Not only do I do it when I attach models to their like completed bases, but you'll see here that when I'm gluing like the little pieces together, attaching everything, I always make sure to go back through and use my washes or shades, depending on what brand you're using, to make sure that we seal in those areas, make sure that we get the best possible connection point, and it's less likely to break in transport or gameplay. So now that we got these bad boys all finished up, we're just going to throw them on our little turntable and give them a spin here, and then we'll take a look at some still pictures of everything when it's all finished at the end. So I love how these came out. Now these ones in particular are done for someone, so the color choice wasn't mine. They picked the purple and also the green with the darker bike color, the gold highlights, all that stuff, and I have to say that it came out awesome. I always think of Halloween when it comes to like purple and green, and they just go really well together. A lot of times the best way to pick colors is to look at someone else's work, see what looks nice, or you can look at sports teams or logos. You can look at the color wheel, because oftentimes they're going to be using colors that go well together. Now these are done with a combination of airbrush and then also hand painted with paintbrushes as well. And I really think that that takes your stuff to the next level. If you use only airbrush, it can look just a little bit like sort of lazy and definitely comes off as airbrushed. If you use only paintbrushing, you're going to have difficulty getting like some of the cooler, smoother blends that you would be able to get with an airbrush. When you use a combination of the two, in my opinion, you get the best of both worlds. And I have to say that I'm very, very happy with how these came out. I really like the overall look of them, the color scheme, everything just came together perfectly at the end. And I really have to say that these are awesome. If you enjoyed today's video, you learned something, get some cool tips or tricks, or maybe you want to share some of your own experiences, feel free to do so down below. It really helps out the channel if you do give us a subscribe, as we're trying to grow, and so far it's been going really well. So I have to thank all the people that have already subscribed and all the people that have left comments, as it really helps out with the YouTube algorithm. Feel free to share the video with your friends, as that really helps out as well. And let me know what you guys think of the actual color schemes or tips or tricks that have worked well for you and sub-assemblies in the past. If you're curious as to how we did like the magnetizing, created the bases, or did any of the particular colors or techniques, feel free to ask questions down below and I'll be glad to answer them as best as I can. So yeah, I gotta say that this was a super cool project to work on. I'm very happy not only with the actual paint jobs, but with the conversion for the shield captain as well. You can see we added in like the shield on the front and then also the wings sort of like protecting his hands. And then of course the cape. The bases are Ruined Temple style custom created bases. I found that magnetizing the bases and the lances works extremely well and prevents a lot of unnecessary breakage. So yeah, let me know what you think of the finished project, and if you enjoyed today's video, make sure to give us a like and subscribe. But that's it from the Tabletop Bros. Later!